You're listening to the Crosstalk Media Network. Your voice, your community, your media.
Good evening and welcome to another edition, a live edition of Two Cups of Joe and Al, a sports show. Joe Sokoa, Albert Plantamore, Joe Cacavalli should be joining us. This is 2 weeks in a row here. These crazy nut jobs showing up late or not showing up at all. But you are listening on the Crosstalk Media Radio Networks on crosstalkmedia.com. We have yet another action-packed show for you tonight. Of course, we are going to take a look at the latest in the MLB playoff races as the American League wild card is absolutely insane right now. So this is the very pivotal time of the year. We still do have about a month of baseball left, but everything is going to be a grind at this point. So we'll take a look at the playoff races as well. The Yankees, of course, if we're looking at the local side, can they hold off Boston? We'll talk a little bit about that as well and what the seedings have and kind of where everyone is with the health of the New York Yankees. We touched base on this last week a little bit, but something is going on bigger than expected out on the West Coast. Mark Walters, the former owner of the LA Lakers. He just recently sold the Lakers for $12.5 billion. We spoke about that last week, but now there's some more hot water coming down, and he might need more money. So what does that mean for the Dodgers? That has got some people talking about Shohei Ohtani. We'll check in with the NFL training camps. Of course, it's preseason. We'll take a look at what's going on at Giants camp, at Jets camp, and around the NFL as well. So once again, a pretty packed show here as we are starting to, Al, get into the better part of the sports calendar. We're still in like that little bit of that lull of the dog days of summer, but it is quickly winding down, and we're getting into, like I said, the bulkier part of the sports calendar. So certainly an exciting time all around, but we missed you last week, so nice of you to be back here this week.
Yeah, I had a bit of an issue last week, but everything's good now.
I hope those dreams were well worth it. I really hope they were well worth it. But a lot has definitely changed here in the last week or so, especially in the playoff races. And we'll get to those MLB playoff races in just a minute. Let's take a look at the local side of things, though, and that is the New York Yankees, because they're still hanging in here. Entering play tonight, they were 5 games back of the Tampa Bay Rays. Right now, they are in the bottom of the 7th inning. They are tied at 3 with the Baltimore Orioles. Of course, as I said, we're live here, 9:04 on the East Coast. Tampa Bay is winning right now in the bottom of the 8th, 7-6 over Toronto. That's a big game there as well. But for the New York Yankees, like I said, they're 5 games back, but the Boston Red Sox are breathing down their necks. And Al, Joe and I spoke about it last week, especially when it comes to now the injuries, and it seems like Max Fried has gotten himself re-injured here, so he's back on the IL. Aaron Judge did have some clear imaging, but they're projecting, hopefully, a early September return for Aaron Judge. Carlos Rodon has been activated. He's going to be back in the rotation here. Cody Bellinger is moving towards rehab assignments. Giancarlo Stanton, who we said this has been the most intense calf injury since April 25th in quite some time, and Clark Schmidt could be a potential bullpen option. So there's a lot of things that are up in the air here about this New York Yankee team that Joe and I, we spoke about it last week, but again, when you think about Boston breathing down their necks, it's very important to get these guys back and get them healthy.
It's not very important. It's imperative. Like without it, there's no chance, and not just one of them. Like we need a few of those guys because that's the heart of our roster right there. So um, you better set your sights low. If you were to say to me, okay, none of them are coming back, that's it, and I've heard whispers that Judge could possibly not play again. Things like that. The season's over. That's it. Like
Well,
pack it up. So, and you want him to come back with a little bit of time, to get his legs under him before the playoffs. And then pitching too, whether it's Max or Schmidt, so and Stanton's important too. With Rice's struggles of late, there's just nobody hitting on this team.
and that seems to be the problem is the Yankees pitching has been fantastic where things might have been shaky a little bit with the bullpen, but they seem to have righted the ship. But it just goes to show how absent-minded they become when it comes to hitting when these guys are out of the lineup. And Joe Cacavalli joining us a little bit late here with us. And Joe, it kind of picks up the conversation that we had last week with this Yankee team because here we are another week. We're still not getting real concrete answers of certain guys. And then Max Fried gets hurt. And Boston is right down and breathing down the Yankees' neck. The Yankees are tied at 3. Tampa Bay is winning 7-6. So it's like, okay, we might have to look at it where, again, still plenty of baseball left, but we have to focus on the wild card. And again, that seeding comes into play when it comes to a first-round wild card matchup. So, has anything changed since we had this conversation last week, and your thoughts on anything?
Well, I think it goes back to the point that we made last week that they're going to start running out of days pretty soon. I think the worst thing that could have changed is that more time on the calendar and more games have gone by. We're only talking about maybe another month and a half left in the regular season. We don't even have regular season games in October this year. Like the World Series is going to end on Halloween, so that means by the end of September, the regular season is going to wrap up. So when you talk about the health of Aaron Judge and now the health of Max Fried as well, you might be running out of chances to get these guys back in to get them loosened up with some real time game action. And you also may be running out of time to catch Tampa Bay. And even though Boston hasn't been, the house on fire they were leading up to the trade deadline, they've still kind of erased a lot of the margin for error that the Yankees have. And they really need to hope, like Al mentioned, that some of these guys start to get back. Bellinger should definitely help, but I think it's very obvious that they need to round out this lineup more because the 3 or 4 guys they usually can rely on to hit have been very spotty lately. So there's rotation won't hold things together for so long.
And again, it really hasn't been the pitching. It has been this hitting. They do have 9 hits in tonight's ball game against the Baltimore Orioles, but still stuck on 3 runs. Again, these two teams tied at 3 in the top of the 8th, while the Blue Jays and the Rays go to the top of the 9th. So the Rays are 3 outs away from potentially, they'll gain a half a game for the moment, but if the Yankees can't find a way to win, they'll pull another game above the Yankees, and then we have to start thinking about, okay, what's the wild card going to look like? Well, what does the wild card look like in the American League? Because in the week since we have had our show last, things have tightened up a little bit, especially in the American League. So the Yankees occupy that first spot at 70-55. That's a 8.5 game lead, at least on the first spot, from any of the teams chasing into that second spot. The second spot is occupied by the Boston Red Sox, 2 back in the loss column, 68-59. So that's good for a plus 5.5. So both the Yankees and the Red Sox do have some cushion to work with at that top, at that number 1 and number 2 spot. It's just a matter of flip-flopping when it comes to position-wise there. Now, this is where things get interesting because that third and final occupied spot right now is in a deadlock tie between the Minnesota Twins and the Texas Rangers. They have the Twins in that spot right now because the Twins do have one more in the win column over the Texas Rangers. After the Texas Rangers, you then have the Toronto Blue Jays, who, again, it's a critical game that they're in right now, but they do have a runner on in the top of the ninth inning with nobody out. So that's something to watch right here because the Toronto Blue Jays, as we mentioned, they're a half a game out, but they're 3 games under 500. It's pretty amazing. The Baltimore Orioles, who are playing the Yankees right now, important game for them. They're 1 game back. The Guardians, 1.5 games back. Detroit, 1.5 games back. And Seattle, 3 games back. So you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams vying for 1 spot in this American League wild card. So it just makes this Yankee team, having to be on their heels just a little bit more here. But, Joe, your thoughts on this jam-packed American League wild card?
I mean, it's pretty amazing to think that the Toronto Blue Jays, who of course were 1 win away from winning the World Series last year, looked like they were dead to rights for most of this season, and even they're just a half game out of the playoffs. And they were a team last year who weren't exactly prohibitive favorites going into the postseason, but they really caught fire at the right time. So a lot of the similar pieces are still there. They don't have Bo Bichette anymore, and they did trade Kevin Gausman at the deadline, but they do bring in Jose Soriano, and they still have the pieces to be a little interesting here. I mean, this last spot is just goes to show how top heavy the American League is once you're past basically the top half of the American League East and the other 2 division winners. It's a pretty steep drop off in quality. And even a team like the Tigers or the Mariners or the Blue Jays, who had come into this season with really high expectations, and the Tigers trading their ace at the deadline, they could still sneak their way in and be a surprise team in October. So the fact that the American League has been so weak in its bottom half going now into the second week of August, there's going to be a lot of drama to unfold here.
No kidding there. Right now, first and second, 1 out. Spencer Jones is at the plate. So the Yankees in a pretty big spot right here with Spencer Jones. And boy, oh boy, he just missed one right down the middle there. And now that speaks volumes there, too, because when you look at the American League, outside of the division winners and kind of segueing into what Joe just said, outside of the Yankees and the Red Sox, everybody else in the American League, including the teams we just mentioned fighting for these wild card spots, are all under 500. And the Yankees being so far over 500, it just makes these types of games, like against the Baltimore, that much more important to win.
Yeah, so basically the way I put it is when you have a down year like we're seeing, I was
This is
thinking
pretty
about this a week
terrible.
or
This
two
league
ago.
is terrible.
I'm sorry, did you hear me now?
Yeah, here, I'm saying the
Oh,
league is terrible because
that's what I was saying. So what I was saying is I don't ever remember the American League being this weak. It feels like the NFL where some years the NFC or the AFC will be weak. Um, and in baseball, I do remember years that the NL was weak. I don't remember the AL ever being this weak. So when you have something like that, everybody is in play. That's why we were talking about like with trade deadline. Does anybody actually become a seller? Because technically anybody can make it. And
Spencer Jones struck out.
when the whole league stinks, every game is so important because again, 1 or 2 games is the difference between you being under 500 and missing the playoffs or under 500 and making the playoffs. Because that's just the way everyone's right there.
Here's the thing, and Joe, you tell me, and even Al, you tell me you agree here, because again, we are seeing that the parity, and we've talked about this week after week. I think the New York Yankees, which I think we all did coming into this season, thought that they were going to be the team coming out of the American League because we kind of saw that the American League we didn't feel was going to be as strong. So we kind of came into the season with a little bit of that hunch and a little bit of that, like the Yankees on paper have the talent to go all the way back, and there's no one you know. So we had set that up in the beginning of the year, and we thought that the National League was going to be a little bit more competitive because that's where a lot of the premier players are. You know, you don't see too many of the premier players, big name players in the American League. You're seeing them all in the National League as wow. Jose Caballero comes up in a pinch hit situation. He gets hit by the pitch, so the Yankees now have the bases loaded and 2 outs here in the top of the 8th inning. Um, but getting back to it, I don't think the Yankees thought that the Rays were going to be this good. Nobody thought that the Rays were going to be this good. And now,
Yeah, nobody did.
like I said, it turns more into every game down the stretch now turns into a playoff game. And that could be a disaster for the Yankees, and that's why it's so important to get these guys healthy and back.
Yeah, so nobody thought the Rays were going to be this good. Maybe some people thought they would be decent. I think people, a lot of people thought Toronto would be good. And they have gone in. You know, they brought in Soriano, but I mean, like, Guerrero has not been good this year, so they're definitely having a down year. Nobody thought the Rays were going to be the best team in the American League, which they are right now in the win wise. I don't think anybody thought Boston. I mean, really? Did you think this young team with their best player out is going to be winning 15 in a row and like 28 of 30, whatever kind of insane streak they went on? The Yankees were the favorite. Like, and they had to be. It wasn't even close on paper. Um, and Seattle is a way down year. Toronto, I think, is having a down year. I think most people didn't think much of Detroit. I picked Cleveland, and I think they're about what I thought they would be. But um, so it was the Yankees, and every game, means something now because, frankly, we should be further ahead than we are right now. Injuries do come into play with that. A terrible general manager making no moves at the trade deadline come into play, like for that. But and when you are underachieve like the Yankees are doing, when you are this much better, this is the result. Where a game against Baltimore, August 17th means a lot.
It absolutely does. And maybe, Joe, you might want to check me on this because, again, we've talked about this, but let's just play hypotheticals, right? If the playoffs were to start now under this new format, I believe the first round buys go to the number 1 and number 2 seeds in the American League. So right now, that would be the Tampa Bay Rays and the Chicago White Sox, ladies and gentlemen.
Which is crazy, the White Sox.
So those two teams would get the buys into the division series. And then the way it would go is 3 versus 6. So the number 3 seed would be the Houston Astros. They would play the worst.
Yankees take the lead. Yankees take the lead.
Is that Lombard coming through?
Yes, there was Lombard coming through. This guy just
right,
was
so
talking about him.
Did I get there? I think I might have gotten thrown back or whatever, but that's pretty good. That's pretty big right there. The Tampa game, I believe, is final, so Tampa Bay wins, but this would be big for the Yankees. So anyway, back to it. The wild card series would be the Astros versus the Twins, and then we'd have a wild card series of the Yankees versus the Red Sox. Now, again, we go back to that seeding because the higher seed would host all 3 games, and let's be honest, you'd rather see a Yankee Red Sox game, all 3 games at Yankee Stadium more than anything.
And you would think, too, the Yankees, on paper, assuming their rotation gets healthy, would have the pitching edge in that series, especially because the Red Sox have gotten absolutely nothing from their best starting pitcher, Garrett Crochet, who almost won the AL Cy Young last year. So to think that their best hitter and their best pitcher aren't even available for most of the season, they're still doing all this. I mean, if you're the Yankees, you really want to make sure that you keep that top spot. You have a couple games up on Boston, but the reality is, I mean, I think not only, like you said, Joe, you want all 3 games at Yankee Stadium, but I think the narrative on this Yankee team drastically shifts if somehow if they're unable to put at least the number 1 wild card away. I mean, even if they don't catch
Yep.
Tampa, if you somehow find a way to drop it to the 5 seed, I hopefully they don't fall into the sixth. That will be an ultimate catastrophe. But if they lose even ground to Boston here and lose that spot, I feel like your expectations of this team, healthy or not, would take a huge hit.
Yeah.
Chisholm just scored on a wild
Yeah.
pitch, 5-3
Yep.
Yankees.
Yep. Saw that. So that's a big cushion there. So again, the Tampa game is final. So the Rays do win. So even if the Yankees do hold on, nothing changes there. But I believe did Boston lost today. So that's going to be huge now. The Yankees would gain a game on Boston with that win. So that would be big there. So that's the American League picture. How about we take a look at what the National League looks like? And the red hot Phillies again. Boy, oh boy, what a roller coaster it has been. But over at the National League, you have the Chicago Cubs occupying the first spot, and they have a +6 game lead. The Phillies are right there. They're 4 games back of that first spot, but they occupy the second spot, and they hold a 2-game lead. But they are playing some big baseball here, 8-2 in their last 10. And then in the third spot right now, it is occupied by those San Diego Padres, who are also playing very good baseball, 7-3 in their last 10.
You
They
said
hold.
the one was the Cubs. It's the Dodgers.
No. I'm talking about in the wild card right now.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I'm
I'm
not looking
sorry.
at the division.
I was
Yeah.
confused.
So it's
Okay.
the Cubs, the Phillies in the 1 and 2 spots in the wild card. The Padres in that third spot, but they hold a 1-game lead over the Arizona Diamondbacks. They have a 2.5-game lead over the St. Louis Cardinals, who were also kind of dead in the water, and they have risen from the grave here, 7-3 in their last 10. You could even go a little bit further down to the Miami Marlins, who are 4 games back. And if we wanted to stretch it just a bit more, Pittsburgh is 5.5 games back before it really kind of falls off there. But the National League wildcard picture seems to be a little bit less hectic than the American League picture. And if we take a look at what the National League would look like if the playoffs were to end or begin today, Milwaukee would be the number 1 seed. How about that? They have a 2-game lead over the Dodgers in that race.
Oh, really? I didn't realize.
Yeah, the Dodgers would be the number 2 seed. And then the wild card series would feature the Atlanta Braves versus the San Diego Padres, and then the Cubs versus the Phillies. So those would be some really intriguing wild card series matchups. So, I mean, if you're looking at this from a standpoint of Major League Baseball, this actually sounds like a pretty entertaining postseason to start.
Yeah, Cubs Phillies, that would be an absolute bloodbath of a wild card series. It would almost be a shame that one of those teams has to go home because at times they have both looked like maybe threats to knock the Dodgers out. I mean, you could make an argument, I think, for 4 out of those top 5 teams on their best day could give the Dodgers a run. I think that the Braves, the Brewers, the Cubs, or the Phillies would all at least have a puncher's chance. I don't think there's a runaway in that set. I think the Dodgers are essentially having them in the National League. You would think, well, the moves they've been making and they think it's bad for baseball, but it's challenging these other teams to raise their game to the point that if they meet them in the playoffs, they're not going to be intimidated. The Brewers definitely won't be intimidated. The Braves won't be. They knocked them out in the postseason
Yeah,
before. So I think you have a juggernaut in the National League, but if
you do.
anything, the rest of these teams are getting toughened up now to get ready for the task.
Without a doubt. And I mean, that Milwaukee team is just unbelievable. And it also goes to show that the Dodgers are mortal and they are able to be beaten. And we've seen that from quite a few teams here, and even games for them. Like I said, they're trailing right now, at least in the best record in the race for the best record in the National League by 2 games over that Milwaukee team. So crazy to see there. And then if you take a look at again this roller coaster ride of the Phillies, where they fire Rob Thompson, they bring in Don Mattingly. It was an immediate impact where they went on a crazy run. Then they went back down, and everyone thought, okay, they're going spiraling. And then a report comes out of some nature that it's basically Mattingly better get to or win the World Series and odds are he's not going to be the manager, that they're already putting it on Alex Cora for next year. So talk about a massive ultimatum. But like I said, they've won 6 in a row here, and they're trying to make another run at this.
And I still think that with their starting pitching as well, I mean, Zach Wheeler, the way he's been able to mostly rebound this year after a surgery where a lot of pitchers' careers have been done with thoracic outlet syndrome, he's been able to bounce back. Christopher Sanchez has been, on most days, one of the best pitchers in the National League. And, Aaron Nola has some big game experience also. Jesus Luzardo has been really good too. So they have the pitching to contend. And you know that they do have a big chip on their shoulder. And that's just kind of the Philadelphia way, the team that has not won the World Series since 2008. So they're very much going to be hungry, but it just seems like they're making a lot of the same mistakes that we see a team like the Mets make, where they just don't know how to run the bases sometimes. They can't play defense. There's been a lot of mental errors for them, and you would think a very seasoned manager like Don Mattingly would be able to clamp down on those things, and those things are going to get you knocked right out of a postseason series. So I think the Phillies absolutely have the talent, but the fact that they're so up and down this season, I think it's mental and I think it's fundamentals more than anything that are kind of holding them back from being that number 2 team that's right up there in the race.
It's interesting. You mentioned a player there, and then I think about another team in the thick of this as well, in the Chicago Cubs, and where they would be without Pete Crow Armstrong. But 2 names there. Can you imagine being a Met fan and listening to the name Zach Wheeler in the sentence of the Philadelphia Phillies, and how he has been just probably one of their best signings in a long time for the Phillies team. And then, of course, Pete Crow Armstrong, who essentially was traded for a bag of peanuts. He's literally in the National League most valuable player conversation. I mean, that's got to be just a gut punch to a New
I
York
think he's
Mets
leading
fan.
the conversation at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he should be right now.
Before we shift gears here, we do want to share the information here and get our thoughts on it. And Joe alluded to it a little bit earlier in his thoughts, but the Major League Baseball postseason schedule is indeed out, and the wild card series, yep, we don't have to wait until October. It starts September 29th. Both series will start on the 29th, the AL and National League wild card series, and those will be 3 straight games: Tuesday the 29th, Wednesday the 30th, and Thursday, October the 1st. NBC will carry all of those wild card series games. So NBC and Peacock have the wild card series. So that those dates bumped up a little bit compared to last year. But again, if you're these teams rolling down, you want to try to wrap things up quickly, because those wild card series in those short series, especially when you have pitching or you need big pitchers to start here, that's going to be absolutely huge, because I think the regular season ends that Sunday. So really, you're just going to have Monday off, and then Tuesday would start the wild card series. So that, again, goes on October 1st. The American League Division Series, Game 1 would start on Saturday, October the 3rd. And then this is a weird schedule, okay? Because you have this series, you have the American League Division Series are doing a day off in between each game. So both game 1s of the Division Series are on Saturday, October 3rd, and then game 2 is on Monday, the 5th. The National
So I guess they're
League,
going to literally
the
stagger each
the
one.
National League is going straight. They're going Saturday, Sunday. So
That's weird.
it seems like they flopped it from last year. So, okay. So here's the American League Division Series. Saturday, October 3rd is game 1. Game 2 is Monday, October 5th. Game 3 is Wednesday, October 7th. So they have a day off in between game 1, game 2, and game 3 in the Division Series. Game 4 would be Thursday. There's the first back to back. And a potential game 5 would be then Saturday. That basically follows, and that's the American League Division Series, both sets of matchups there. The National League Division Series starts Saturday, October 3rd, Game 1. Game 2 is Sunday, October 4th. Game 3 is Tuesday, October 6th. Game 4, Wednesday, October 7th. And Game 5 is October 9th. So the National League Division Series has the traditional schedule over the American League. American League Division Series will be on TBS. National League Division Series will be on Fox. Then you get to the Championship Series. The NLCS would start Game 1 Sunday, October the 11th. Okay, so now it flops. So Game 1 is Sunday, October 11th. Game 2 is Monday, October 12th. Game 3 is Wednesday, October 14th. Game 4 is Thursday the 15th. Game 5 would be Friday the 16th. So Game 3, 4, and 5 would be straight through, no days off. Then the American League Championship Series, Monday the 12th. Game 1, Game 2 is Tuesday the 13th. Game 3, Thursday the 15th. Game 4, Friday the 16th. Game 5, Saturday the 17th. Game 6 would be Monday the 19th. And Game 7 would be the 20th. So then obviously it flops. NLCS is on Fox. ALCS is on TBS. And then the World Series, this is the earliest I think we've seen it, fellas. Doesn't even go into November. It might, though, if they have a Game 7. But Game 1 would be October 23rd. Friday, October 23rd. Boy, that lined up perfectly. Game 1 and Game 2, a Friday and a Saturday night of the World Series. That's amazing. October 23rd and 24th. Game 3, 4, and 5 would be Monday the 26th, Tuesday the 27th, Wednesday the 28th. Game 6 would be Friday the 30th, and a Game 7 would be on Halloween, which is a Saturday. So, very interesting the way they did the postseason schedule this year.
I miss the days where I get excited about Halloween being on a Saturday and I can
like
get
that.
ready to go out trick or treating.
Yeah.
But I do like how they have I guess they want to get all games on that first day of postseason play. They just want to have like wall to wall games going the whole day, I guess.
It's just gonna suck when the division series, I mean, even the wild card series, because now you start talking about, and we'll get to it when it gets closer, the scheduling. You know that there's going to be afternoon games. But if it winds up being the way everything, like if the playoffs started today and we have the Yankees Red Sox, that has to be the primetime game every night. Yankees Red Sox. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen that in a little bit. And it stinks because it would be a wild card best of 3. So, before we wrap up baseball altogether and we go into the football, there is one more piece of baseball news that, again, starting to grow. Al wasn't here with us last week when we talked about it on the show, and we kind of brought it up, and that was Mark Walters, who was the businessman who had owned he owns the Dodgers. He owned, past tense, the Lakers, but he recently sold that, and that's also because of a federal investigation where there's some scheming going on. So he sells the Lakers about a year and a half after acquiring them, which he paid $10 billion for, and then he flipped them for $12.5 billion just 2 weeks ago. There's talks about now it's going even deeper, and the debt is so big that he's now going to have to sell stakes in potentially his Chelsea Football Club investment. And there's some rumblings about the Dodgers. And Craig Carton on WFAN brought it to light today as well. Like I said, we started talking about it last week, but this thing is starting to gain some traction here, Joe.
And think about the frenzy this would cause if we even get to a realistic possibility of the Dodgers or any part of them being sold. I mean, the frenzy that's happened over the Lakers, the Dodgers might break even that.
Might even break that, but also it it makes you wonder about all these deferred contracts. And the other interesting part is, and this is what I think Craig Carton was talking about and emphasizing on the show as well, is that there is a special clause in Shohei Ohtani's contract that if Mark Friedman, who's the president of baseball operations, were to be removed or no longer with the team, or if the owner, Mark Walters, ever had to sell the team, that there is an opt-out clause in Ohtani's contract that he can get out of that contract and pursue opportunities with other major league teams. So that's a piece of interesting news.
Is there an out clause in his contract if another translator starts messing with his money again, or how does that work?
That'd be interesting. And Al, you weren't even on the show for that last week. Did you ever listen to that podcast of the portrayal of Shohei Ohtani?
Yes.
What was your thoughts on that?
I just don't buy it.
Okay.
I see. I'm not saying I don't know either way. I'm not psychic. I I don't know. As a logical person, I don't see how a person that's worth $87 trillion is going to, get himself into trouble gambling. I just don't see it.
Yeah. So.
But again, that would mean everyone, makes sense, and they don't. Why do people, why does Michael Jordan gamble? He's a billionaire, literally,
Yep.
and he bets $50,000 hands of blackjack. So, of course it could happen. I don't know. Maybe just knowing the culture of Japan, I don't see. Maybe if he was from somewhere else, I wouldn't give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I do. I don't know. I don't feel it.
Fair enough. So 9:37 here on the East Coast. It is 2 Cups of Joe and Al here Wednesday, August 19th. And we shift our focus now to NFL training camp as the preseason is fully underway, workouts. And, I mean, there's been quite a few scrums throughout some of the training camps. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But focusing in on the local teams, we start with the New York Football Giants. Jackson Dart, things looking pretty good, but obviously a new system under new head coach John Harbaugh and his staff. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses forward. Malik Neighbors is working back from his ACL surgery, and he's being, handled cautiously rather than being rushed into the into contact. So I think, Joe, as training camp continues to go on and all these things are happening and learning these systems, is this season about winning immediately, or are we trying to find out, if Dart is the franchise quarterback? Like, what type of season are we thinking about here as a Giants fan?
I think you're going to see a definite improvement, at least as far as the record compared to last year, because we talked about it a lot of times throughout the year last year. There were games they 100% should have won, but coaching mishaps and knowledge gaps and scheme gaps are really what stopped them from winning those games. So I think they will polish those things up this year. I think Jackson Dart now, being a quarterback that's under a second head coach already, we know how much of a fan of his Brian Dable was before. So he has to prove a little bit himself, but John Harbaugh, especially these first few weeks of the season, he really has to put his stamp on this locker room, has to put his stamp on this team. And we're already starting to see that shift around a little bit because he's already kind of tinkering with the roster, guys who either weren't able to play in the first preseason game or guys who didn't play that well are getting shuffled around a little bit. I think he's going to be filling this thing out as much as other people is, but I think just his presence and his ability as a head coach alone, with hopefully some renewed health from their key pieces, I do think you're going to see a definite improvement. But I don't think this is going to be the year just yet to go all in on them as a playoff team. But I think they're going to be a team they're going to hang around most games, and I think they're going to give some teams that are clearly better than them a pretty good fight.
Fair enough of an assessment there. And over on the New York Jets side, you have Geno Smith back in that New York Jets uniform. A little bit of ankle soreness worth monitoring as they weigh some of his preseason reps. Obviously, we're looking at Klubnik, who is obviously looking at a little bit of a limited work load there. And then you have Brees Hall, who's handling a groin injury, so he continues to remain a camp concern. Um, you know, Al, what's your take on what you're seeing thus far in New York Jets camp? And I guess, without going into too much detail, but what's the expectation, at least coming out of this preseason right now?
Well, I don't know what the expectations are. I really don't. I think the expectations have been now for another year that we're playing for next year, honestly. And I think it was a 3-year plan. Obviously, they don't want to stink. They want to go out there and compete. The players certainly do. A player's never going to tank. Um, I think the franchise, but obviously the coach wants to too because he was so bad last year. He might be out of a job, and year three might be year one of another a coach. I'm hearing a lot of good things about Klubnik. I was reading, camp reports, and they were saying how good he's been. Also, Cade York, the field goal kicker, and then with Hall, I mean, it's bad news. He's definitely our biggest weapon, and that's not to sell Garrett Wilson short, but I don't care how good of a wide receiver you are, you still rely on the quarterback, just like a running back relies on the offensive line. I think I was reading grades the other day of the best offensive line, and the Jets were quite low. I was shocked with how low they were. I don't know why. Um, they weren't bad last year. I know the players. They're young. I couldn't believe it. And what I've seen thus far, and what I expect to see, would have us a lot higher than the bottom third of the league. So I think that bodes well for Brees Hall, who I think a lot of the success, if whatever success we have this year, will be due to him. Garrett Wilson, who also is an immense talent and one of the better young wide receivers in the league, I think is going to be very limited by Geno. But depending, I don't know what Geno we're going to see. Are we going to see Geno from last year? He was absolutely dreadful. But don't forget, Geno in Seattle was pretty damn good. So I don't know. I don't expect much from him. But that's what limits there. Already banged up. It's worrisome when you hear a groin injury because those injuries can really be nagging. They heal, they aggravate. They heal, they aggravate. And then for Gino, the ankles, any joint injury can be problematic. I think that's pretty minor. They're gonna keep his. I know today he had like no reps. He's just not gonna get many reps for now. Um, they're not gonna get anybody hurt in any of these games, and just see where we are in maybe 2 weeks. The last game is where we'll see. I think we'll have a better outlook on the health going into the season.
So my question is, if the Jets are 0-3 to start the season, do they fire their coach?
They won't. They didn't fire him after last season. He was without question, by any metric used, the worst coach in the NFL. Now, if you want to say the team was dog shit, that is correct. You want to say it was his first year as a head coach in his career, that is also correct. We're going to give him another year. He had to learn. The team stinks. They had to learn. I don't agree. I would have fired him after last year. Are they going to fire him at 0-3? No. I don't think they'll fire him unless they're like 0-10. I don't think he gets fired during the season. I think if the season's bad enough, he will get fired after the season. And then year three in the 3-year plan, which is the year that I think they plan to draft the quarterback, which is next year, they'll just go again. That'll be the first year by design that, okay, we're going to try to win now, though I don't think we'll win much with a rookie quarterback. But that's what they're saying, even though I do see some people picking the Jets to be a playoff team next year because of the other pieces they put in. I think that will be with a new coach. But if they're 0-3, zero chance Glenn gets fired. Zero chance. 0 not even 0-6, honestly. 0-8, maybe he gets fired. But 0-3, no way.
Okay.
But I
Uh,
would have. I'd fire him tomorrow. I don't think he's a good coach. I didn't think he was a good coach as a defensive coordinator in Detroit. I don't know why. Remember how good those Detroit teams were. Their defense wasn't. And they have Aiden Hutchinson running around sacking everybody, and they weren't. And people don't see those things, that high stats because you have a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. I think he was the wrong hire, and I just don't see it with him. I don't. They should have brought back Rex Ryan. That's what they should have did.
hmm, interesting.
If
Uh,
if they were going to go defensive. Now remember, I wanted an offensive coach, but if they were going to go defensive, they should have brought back Ryan.
okay. How about around the rest of the NFL training camps? Of course, you got young quarterbacks that remain the league-wide camp story. Bo Nix is a key return to action after last season's ankle injury. I think the biggest blow we heard about today was Texans' Jaden Higgins. He has a torn ACL. He's out for the season. And then these joint practices have become a little bit of a circus show with quite a bit of fighting going on. I think we heard in was it the Saints practice and somebody else, the joint practice, where apparently a former wrestler's son, one of the Steiner brothers' son, did like a friggin' suplex in one of those joint practices. So, Joe, your thoughts for around the league as far as the training camps are concerned?
Well, Triple H might be already getting on the phone to try and bring I think it's Scott Steiner's son to the WWE once his football days are done. But you mentioned Bo Nix. I'm really keeping an eye on Denver this year because a lot of the talk when the Giants hired Harbaugh is that no head coach has ever won a Super Bowl with two different franchises. But we saw how close Denver got last year, and Sean Payton has already won a Super Bowl in New Orleans. So he could be the first one. I think that they're going to be a really interesting team to watch. Of course, you look at a team like the Chiefs, who, with so many different injuries and wide receivers that either can't stay healthy or can't stay out of trouble, trying to figure out where they fit in and all that as well. I mean, there's a lot of, I think the Brees Hall injury is also a big time question as far as where things shake out. I know a lot of fantasy owners are getting ready for their drafts and probably looking at some of these early injuries. And I will say, as a final thing, do we need any more signs to get rid of the friggin' turf at MetLife Stadium? Because now Jamal Adams tore his ACL this week. I mean, let's get rid of that turf and go back to grass because there was grass for the World Cup and everything was fine. So we got to get rid of that damn turf.
Huh. Al, what's your take from around the rest of the league as well?
I mean, Joe just preached with that because how many players are going to lose? Major players that cost the NFL money. We're not talking about a end of the bench guy. Star players missing entire seasons because of turf. Just get the grass. I don't understand it. Like it's a small investment. Just do it. Um, I'm interested. There's so many things going in, carrying over from last year. Obviously, the Chiefs dynasty, kind of ended last year. And the guys kind of aged out, but now they're back. You still have Mahomes, who still got plenty of career left. But what's left of his team? Like can Rice stay out of trouble? He's already in trouble for something. I don't even know what it was, but I know I heard he was in trouble for something. Um, Kelsey is 100 years old. So I think the Chiefs are a big story. I agree with Denver. I think Denver has to be going in as one of the favorites. Um, right now, Seattle is favored, or maybe possibly the Rams, but Seattle's obviously up there. Can Darnold bring it back again after, last year's big surprise? What's going to happen was that um, Patriots season last year, was that like just a flash in the pan, or are they that good even though they're this young of a team? We heard Kyler Murray is going to be starting in Minnesota. What's going on with McCarthy? And when you have Minnesota with two absolute phenomenal wide receivers, Justin Jefferson and Addison, who I think takes a bit of a backseat because of how good Jefferson is, but I think Addison's also phenomenal. Kyler definitely helps them more. I think maybe that move is something to keep them happy because if you brought in a quarterback like McCarthy who can't get them the ball and they had another major down year like they had last year, they would want out, and the Vikings obviously don't want to lose players like that. And, you know, are the Bengals going to start terrible like they start every year? Or is that team that has massive amounts of firepower going to get off on the right foot so they don't dig themselves a hole that they play the whole season trying to get out of? A lot of questions going in. Obviously, health is a big thing. And, and the Rams, I think, um, can Detroit come back, after another down year last year with all their firepower? I think the Rams bringing in Garrett is almost a cheat code. You bring in the defensive player of the year to an already dominant team with a dominant defense. Um, if Stafford has, life left in his old body, that's a dangerous team. So there's so many questions going forward now.
Well, what we're going to do is we talked about it before we got on the air, but we might as well say it when we're on the air, and Joe could be part of it. So next week, we're going to record a podcast, and we will give you the fantasy football preview. So we'll have a podcast recorded for everyone preparing for their fantasy football drafts. That can come next week. And by the last week of August, we are going to schedule our live NFL preview show as well. So that's coming up in just the next couple of weeks. So things are getting pretty exciting around here, and things are starting to pick up as we get into the fall portion of the sports calendar. And Al, before I let you go, because I kind of going to end with this segment here, but we got to show some love to what is now underway as of today, and that is the Little League World Series. And it's always exciting around this time of year, but I do want to read something that was tweeted out earlier today from the Little League World Series social media account. Little League International stands by its statement first issued last year that there is no place for betting on Little League games and players or any youth sports competition. Little League is a trusted place where children are learning the fundamentals of the games and all the important life lessons that come with having fun, celebrating teamwork, and playing with integrity. And no one should be exploiting the success and failures of children playing the game they love for their own personal gain. I mean, are we that sick of the society
Yes.
of degenerates that we're going to bet on the
Yes,
Little League
so,
World Series?
Here's a tip. Bet on the Dominican kid that looks 27.
I will not answer that question without a lawyer present. I plead the fourth in honor of Jaden Daniels.
All right, but anyway, it's pretty
That's
sick.
great.
Sick that had to be. And then, of course, there was the whole incident we talked about last week with apparently a team was disqualified because of an ineligible player being older than what he was. It was a whole to-do. But anyway, this is it now. This is Williamsport as it opened up today. So 20 teams made this tournament, 10 from the United States, 10 from the international clubs. And this tournament runs through August 30th when the U.S. champion faces the international champion for the world title. The local team that we have here, if we're cheering on a local part of it, is the Bayonne Central Little League. And they opened up with a win today as they marked their first trip to Williamsport, and they beat Bridgewater, Massachusetts 2-1 in a tightly contested game. They came back. Bayonne's run to Williamsport was dramatic. In the Metro Championship, they came back from a 6-2 deficit to beat Connecticut 8-6 in that game. So they're talking about this Bayonne team being the Cinderella team. Their next game is Friday against Westchester, Pennsylvania, the Mid-Atlantic champion. Over on the international side, you have the Asia Pacific representation from South Korea, and they shut out Canada 7-0 in their opening game as well. Back on the U.S. side, the Soundview Little League from Tacoma, Washington beat Phoenix City, Alabama 2-0 today. Tacoma will then get a matchup on Friday against Bourne, Texas. Another one is going to be on the international side. The Latin America representation from Nicaragua opened up with a 2-1 victory over the Dominican Republic today. They'll face Panama on Friday. So big games on Thursday. You're going to have Australia versus Mexico. You're going to have Hamilton, Ohio versus Henderson, Nevada. Japan versus Curacao. And Bonita, California versus Davenport, Iowa. So yeah, exciting times at the Little League World Series. Just don't bet on them. Just don't bet on them. Have you caught any of the Little League World Series? I think it's always fun around this time, especially when you get to Williamsport.
Yeah, so I went to camp. I went to baseball camp in Williamsport. The official Little League camp 3 years in a row. Back, let's see, I'm 45. I would have been so about 35 years ago. So I spent the summers in Williamsport. And they would bring us there all the time. And I always catch a bunch of games. I didn't realize till before when I pulled up ESPN and it showed a score, USA 2-1, but it was USA versus USA. I was like, what is that, like a soccer friendly? And I looked and it was Little League World Series. I was like, oh, I didn't realize it was starting already.
Yep. Nope. Started today.
And Friday is the MLB. That's the Little League Classic.
Yes, it is. That's who's playing in that game? I think it's the Braves. The Braves Brewers. That's a great game. Great game to have there on the Little League Classic there. And speaking of which, you guys catch the Field of Dreams game on Netflix that apparently did not do so well ratings wise.
Yeah, I didn't even know about it until last night. I'm putting on Breaking Bad that I've been rewatching, and I saw the thing come up. I was like, "What is this?" I was like, "They got baseball now too," because football now. The Christmas games are on Netflix, and I noticed what it was. They do have the replay on it, so I am gonna probably this weekend give it a watch. But I didn't even know. I think they do a horrible job advertising.
Yeah, what a piss poor marketing. On such
exactly.
a beautiful
Home Run Derby didn't do well on Netflix either.
It's a beautiful site, man. It's a beautiful site. I thought that was probably one of their best ideas that they ever came up with.
You know what I think a lot of it is years ago we all had TV and we all had the channels on, so the commercials would be on TV. 2 4 now. you know, HBO Go doesn't advertise Netflix and Prime doesn't have. So everyone's either watching Netflix or Prime or so when you have 37 different things, they're not advertising each other. So if you don't have on Netflix, you're not going to see the marketing for it. They need to do a better job marketing online, and I don't think they do. I think they do a terrible job of it. Which is why I didn't even know,
I mean, like I said, Joe, I mean, it is. I thought it was great when it was the Yankees and the White Sox going back to that old school uniform, and then the fact that these guys are launching home runs into the corn. Man, what a literally like drop of the ball, and especially like there's nothing going on at this point of the summer. So yeah, even if it's a random August night, it's a perfect marketing opportunity.
Yeah, well, I feel like MLB always falls short in like marketing things. They have such good connections with all these special games. Like they played a game, in like respect to the Negro leagues at the at Rickwood Field a couple of years ago. They do the Field of Dreams game. They usually open the season a lot in whether it's Korea or Japan, or they've done games in London. So MLB usually does a pretty good job of getting different locations involved, but it always just seems like unless it's a big team like the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Red Sox that's involved, I always just feel like they're kind of it is what it is. And I feel like now, especially, like we always have this complaint about football where you need like 6 streaming services to watch the NFL. The MLB is going to run into that problem too because you're going to have a lot of people. Netflix is like the most expensive one out of all of them, I feel like. So that's probably your best bet of not having certain fans that are going to be able to access it. So that's a definite gap they have to work on.
All right, well, Al, I know you didn't get a chance to watch it, but like just listen. Even this, like again, I think everything about the production this year was way better than we saw in the past, and they let the game speak for itself. But like, listen to this opening monologue. I thought this was unbelievable. They're showing the spots of the Field of Dreams house.
From the very first time someone ever thought of hitting a ball with a bat, catching it with a glove, and somehow putting it all together on a diamond. The game of baseball has endured.
56,000 of the lucky ones are here today.
It's traveled all over the world with its irresistible intricacies and charm. It's reminded us that the game belongs to everyone. It stayed close to our hearts, with memories made year after year, season after season.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Story
There's a new home run champion of all time.
after story.
He is gone. Gibby, meet Freddie.
And once
Oof,
upon a
killer.
time, a baseball story was told here too, right on this field, within the green waves of the sweet summer corn that embodied all the dreams this game can seem to make possible.
Hits it in the air right.
And so this place too has endured to remind us of what baseball can make us feel.
I mean, if that didn't give you goosebumps, I mean, that was freaking awesome. And of course, it's Kevin Costner narrating it with that backdrop of Field of Dreams. But again, horrible marketing job by the Major League Baseball folks.
If it's not Shohei, they don't want anything to do with it.
Oh, the Shohei.
And I just would say, like, and baseball has a history that no matter what your favorite sport is, basketball, football, baseball, hockey, none of them have the history that baseball have. None of them have the Americana. And so a thing like this with Kevin Costner and a classic movie, so bringing Hollywood into it and just brings a nostalgia feel that no other sport can do. So it really is something that baseball's smart for tapping into. That just maybe do a little better job marketing it.
I don't disagree. And like I said, there was a lot of backlash over the last couple of years with it in production, and I think that they scaled back tremendously. I think it was perfectly done. It just, and then I thought it was really funny that they announced the 2027 game is going to have like the Red Sox and I forgot who, and yet no, it's not, because there's going to be no baseball next year.
Yeah, that's true.
So gonna be real interesting.
It's gonna be a real
25-game season.
It's gonna be a real boring summer. Imagine all these months, once basketball and hockey end, until football, we have baseball, which is on every day. Imagine no baseball. I remember, I'm old enough to remember the strike, what, in 95?
94, 95.
Or 94. I don't remember what it was like. So what is it going to be like having no sports on,
It's going to be COVID. It's 2020 all over again because
Yeah, wow, that
the
is
only
going to be
thing-
what it's like.
the only thing they put on was ESPN was like broadcasting like the Korean baseball league. The only thing being played.
That's going to be real interesting. I mean,
There
that's gonna,
really will be gambling on the Little League World Series if there's no baseball, I'll tell you that.
I was going to say, then they better figure out, another league better figure out how they can capitalize on that. I know usually after the NFL season, around April is when the UFL now, or whatever the hell the new merged thing is? That's what it is, the
With,
UFL?
like it was the XFL and the USFL merged. I guess it's just the UFL now, isn't it?
I don't know. I guess so.
I'm so confused with all the leagues. I don't even know which one is which in all those.
Yeah,
leagues.
it's the UFL, the United Football League. Well, maybe now they'll go from 6 to 12 people in this thing. Like they'll go baseball next year.
I think we're definitely going to be betting, like Al said, on Little League, World Series.
Yeah, I'm taking Japan and Chinese Taipei, so let's go.
That or DraftKings has to bring back betting on WWE events.
You know what's really funny though? Interesting thing before, again, I know we're just like spewing now and just having a conversation, but they had a graphic talking about Shoeless Joe Jackson and the movie, and then the camera just does a hard cut to an MGM betting promo on the outfield wall.
Yeah, they do. It's all gambling is bad with a wink and nod. I think so.
Whatever. I think that's it. I don't think that's really. Last week we did talk. Al, I don't know if you have followed as well, but I think we had our first interaction this past week, Joe. Oba Femi in WWE and Braun Breaker. They got something cooking. That could be like a Rock Stone
that's
Cold
gonna be
Steve
money.
Austin. That could be like a Rock Stone Cold like legacy run for years if they play it right.
Which we know these days they never play anything right.
They definitely don't. One piece of note as well, I do believe the next part of the FedEx Cup is up next in golf, which is the BMW Championship, which gets underway tomorrow. Yeah. So that's happening as well. All right, Al, thanks for joining us and being awake this week and sharing your wonderful insight. Like I said, next week, be on the lookout. We will get a fantasy football preview show out there for you as well.
All right, take care, guys.
That is Albert Plantamora joining us here on Two Cups of Joe and Al. Joe, any parting words before we kind of get out of here?
Well, I feel like last week last 2 weeks we've kind of kept these threads on. Let's see what the Yankees can do, and things are gonna get down to nut cutting time real soon. So I'm looking forward to the stretch run because I always start to feel a little sad when baseball's coming to an end. But I always love watching the playoff races, and before you know it, football's gonna be here. But I will say
we got to get playoff baseball going here. We got to get playoff baseball.
That's true. But I am not touching anything to do with fantasy until like right before the week starts, until the year starts, because I'm not getting snake bitten by a running back injury.
I don't blame you. All right. You have been listening to Two Cups of Joe and Al right here on the Crosstalk Media Network. On behalf of Albert Plantamora and Joe Cacavalli, I am Joe Sokoa. We'll see you next week. Be sure to check out everything on crosstalkmedia.com and download the iOS mobile app.